I don't want to see the team fail in a direction that I don't think is going to be a smart direction to go in. But I think allowing them to do that has allowed them to kind of navigate, because I do feel like with more information comes more knowledge. With more knowledge comes more proactive, like regulations and like barriers. But
I
then
agree.
if they're not allowed to fail because the barriers are set in place, like how will they ever gain the required skill?
Right. There's a depth of knowledge or understanding of any subject matter. Again, whether it's sports, dance, construction, doesn't really matter. When you are allowed to fail, or when you do fail, you learn what not to do. And I think your depth of understanding or knowledge of any subject matter deepens. And I think that's a good thing. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great.
So usually with everyone else, I'll give them a softball question, but you, I want to dive right into the heart of it because you're a passionate guy. We have a lot of great conversations off screen, so I wanted to bring it here. What, in no other terms, makes you extremely mad or annoying to see in the industry?
Well, it's easy for me to get there. Interestingly, my IT guy articulated it best several years ago when he said, your motor runs a little hot. So it's easy for me to get there, but as a builder, we pride ourselves on the time we take to plan things out, to set the expectation, to make sure that everybody's on the same page with scopes of work, drawings. We use a cloud-based platform where everybody's got access to the information. And I think one of the things, or the thing that is the most irritating, is that we do all of this prep. And then the guys that are going to come and do the work show up at the site and say, so what are we doing? And you just want to choke them out. It's like, it's so frustrating because so much effort has gone into getting to that moment so that things can be just executed and you start over.
Yeah.
And and my theory on that, as our workforce gets younger and younger, so much is automated that they don't put the time in ahead of time to prep themselves for the job that they're supposed to do. So it's kind of, to me, it's the lion's share of that responsibility is really owned by the company owner or the foreman or the supervisor of that particular company. But at the same time, if I'm being hired to go do a job, I should know before I show up what I'm going to be doing. Like, how do you even how do you get yourself ready? I mean, if you're an athlete, you're watching film, you're getting ready for the team you're going to play. How do you just show up and not know what you're going to do?
Do you feel like that's a shift from the way things used to be like 20, 30 years ago?
100%.
Gotcha. So you think it's like automation technology that's causing that delay?
I don't think it's automation and technology. I think it's the automated nature of our society. Everything is spelled out. I think, unfortunately, as a result of a lot of the automation, some of the specialization, I don't think people have the critical thinking skills that they did 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that. I talk a lot about how I'm not from the industry. So I coach a all-girls dance team at BU. And it's interesting, when I was like a college captain, I was digging through everything, like forum pages, whatever was available on YouTube, all the videos. And I'm going into like hours and hours and hours of research to figure out how to run a team. And now being a coach, it's like, here's everything I learned. And then I found myself at this point where I'm like, usually by month 4 or 5, it should be self-sufficient. It should just kind of work itself out. And I'm like, what's happening? Like, why is this not working? And then I remembered, right, half of the battle was digging for the skill.
Yep.
And then understanding, like, once you figure out the skill, you figure out the 1% difference on this side, 1% different on that side, 5% difference, 5%, 10, 10, and then fully using it or not using that skill. And I think it's something similar here where do you feel like there needs to be some sort of, I guess, like intake exercises, like workshop based training, or like something to get, the younger generation more invested in trying to find the actual skills or how to be more prepared? Do you feel like it's a lack of education thing, or do you think it's a lack of focus thing from like the higher up side?
I think there's several levels to that, and I think it starts at home with parents. I think as parents um, we have to expect more from our young people. I think whether it's teachers, whether it's parents, whether it's supervisors at work, um, you know, come to me with solutions. I'm not going to tell you everything. I'm not going to. I don't. I tell my own people. It is very different. If you come to me and say, "Hey, this happened. I can do this or I can do this. What would you like me to do?" That is a different question than if you come to me and say, "This happened. What do you want me to do?" If I have to downshift to solve your problem or your issue, what do I need you for? But I don't think that there's enough accountability in our society, from parents to teachers to supervisors. I think we're all too willing to solve that issue for these young people.
Yeah.
Um, I, that's how I see it.
Yeah. I wonder if you have a similar take on this using the dance perspective.
Mhm.
One thing I tried to do as a coach was allow them to make their own decisions and let them see what that plays out. Because I
Sure.
think a lot of times, especially for parents, is you're being proactive, you don't want to see your kid hurt. Or in my situation, like I don't want to see the team fail in a direction that I don't think is going to be a smart direction to go in. But I think allowing them to do that has allowed them to kind of navigate, because I do feel like with more information comes more knowledge. With more knowledge comes more proactive, like regulations and like barriers. But
I
then if
agree.
they're not allowed to fail because the barriers are set in place, like how will they ever gain the required skill?
Right. There's a depth of knowledge or understanding of any subject matter. Again, whether it's sports, dance, construction, doesn't really matter. When you are allowed to fail, or when you do fail, you learn what not to do. And I think your depth of understanding or knowledge of any subject matter deepens. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, you don't want to let somebody fail where there's going to be like a physical like result to that. You don't want anybody to get hurt. But I think that I know for personally, I learned so much more from my mistakes than I learned from my wins, and it's made me better at every level.
I wonder if you can figure out what question I'm about to ask next. What's your one mistake or failure that kind of sticks on with you to this day?
I think that if I could go back and tell a younger version of myself, or give a younger version of myself a piece of advice, that advice would be to focus more, do what you do well. Don't try and be everything to everybody. I wasted, I shouldn't say I wasted. I I lost a lot of money and years experimenting, trying to do things, trying to be everything to everybody, kind of being a squirrel, thinking, hey, I can make money doing that. I'm gonna try that. I'm not risk averse. So as a result, I've taken a lot of chances in my career. I've always I've never been afraid to fail because I always knew I had a time to I could just fix it. Now, as I get older, I realize that I have a finite period of time, so I've got to be a little bit more conservative with my decision making. And as I've become more conservative, I've started to notice how much more profitable that is. So
Yeah.
if I could go back and say, "Hey, 20-year-old me, um, make that conservative choice, and you'll be a lot wealthier when when you're a little older." So I think that would be my thing.
What was, I guess, a driving force for your risk taking behavior? Was it like you had said, like, don't try to be everything to everyone else, but do you feel like that was a necessity of, I want to be there for all the clients that I work with, or like, I want to try different things? Like, what was that driving force that made you more risk taking?
I think it was trying different things. I started my business very young, and I I had a lot of young people come to me for counsel to say, hey, or ask, I'm thinking about starting a business. You started when you were younger. What can you tell me? And my answer was always that if you want to decide what type of projects that you want to do, if you want to decide the areas you want to work in or the type of people you want to work for, then you're absolutely making the right decision. Make your own decisions about your company. Uh, that's great. If you are starting your own business because you want to make the big bucks like the boss, you are making a terrible mistake. And and I think for me, my motivation, or not motivation, but what kept me so risk averse is that I'm one of those guys that I'll try different ways. If I know how to get home, I'm going to try different ways because I want to find the best way. So so I've always tried different things. My business has changed. How I run my business changed. Uh, how I do everything changes because I'm always trying to find that sweet spot, the best way to do what I do. Um, and I think not being afraid to make a mistake. And again, I'll go back to that generational thing. I think kids today are not all, but I think in general, our society is much more risk averse. They're much more afraid to make a mistake
Mhm.
for a lot of reasons. I think there's, uh, I think people are afraid to make a mistake because they don't want to look like a failure. They don't want to, you look at, I think it might have been Ben Franklin. I forget who said it.
Mhm.
But it was either Ben Franklin, maybe it was Albert Einstein said, I've never failed. I just found 10,000 ways it didn't work,
That's beautiful.
So,
Yeah.
um, but I think for me, it's always been trying to find that perfect way to get something done. I'm a perfectionist, so I'm always looking for a better way.
Hmm. Have you found it? The
No,
perfect way?
no, you know what? I think that's where we stagnate. If we ever feel like we've gotten there, that's where you start to circle the drain.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever get there. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm always going to be trying to find a better way. Even inside, that talking to the folks that I'm talking to inside, going around the, uh, the exhibit hall, I'm asking questions. I'm trying to absorb. Uh, there's 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 never an end result. You're always going to be elevating.
Yeah. I think a lot of people sometimes say like, I always try to learn. And then if you hear that cliche, because I agree, don't get me wrong. I think there are many things that I've like really spent a lot of time doing, drumming, dancing, things like that. But genuinely, I think it's what we don't get to explain sometimes to people listening or to people watching, like experts talk about whatever they're talking about, is it's the chase for change and innovation as well. Learning is always going to be a part of yourself because by the time you perfected, even if you're 99% of the way there, things will just get flipped on its head, like
Yeah,
AI and then things like
things
that.
change.
And I think, what would you say to people like your colleagues, whether it be like your best friends or whether it be people that, are just in the luxury building side of things? What would you say that they should probably learn more about?
If I can put that in the context of how I see myself, you always want to work on the things you're not as good at. You want to work on the things that uh, I'll always use sports analogies, right? If I can hit a fastball, I'm going to work on trying to hit a curve. So I think you need to work on the things that you're not as strong with. Um, your strong suits are always going to come easier. So if you can work on the things, work on the blind spots, work on the holes. Uh, that's yeah, that's what I think is important.
Yeah, and I think it's fun to bring that up because if you ask someone, what should you work on? They'll say weaknesses. But I think a lot of times people are afraid to work on their weaknesses because it's actually almost paradoxical to what you said, will rely on your strengths.
Sure.
But I think sometimes to rely on your strengths, you have to mitigate the damage. Again, bringing dancing into it as a judge, I'll like judge some competitions and I'll tell people, you don't need to be the best. Like, you don't need to cover your weakness entirely, just a tiny bit.
Hmm.
Because where you shine, you'll get all the points in that column.
Right.
But at least if something goes wrong in your strength, your weakness isn't super far below.
Sure.
And like, I guess to tie it all together is like we've talked about mistakes and we've talked about, like learning and improvement. And I guess here at the show, um, it's fun to be around people that really care. And I said this last night to everybody, was like some of my best friends here, they're all like 30 years older than I am, but like they're all consultants. They all try to give back and like talk to each other. Do you find people learning from their mistakes or trying to like learn from others like in this space more so than, I don't know, like a different trade show or a different venue? Do you feel like there's a lot more conversation happening here? And you can answer this like genuinely.
Yeah, I think it's pretty consistent. Uh, I've started public speaking at IBS. I speak here, and my motivation has always been that as a young guy, I capitalized on a lot of smart people, listening to a lot of smart people with a lot of experience. And now as an old guy, I just feel compelled to give back. If I can help some of the young folks that are coming behind me not make some of the mistakes that I made, or can give them some portion of my experience to help advance them, I want to do that because I got that from the people before me. So I guess to answer your question, it's pretty consistent. I find that the older generation in our industry, regardless of whether it's tech or whether it's the IBS or whatever, I find everybody to be uh, pretty pretty enrolled on trying to give back and help that next generation along.
Yeah. So, one piece of advice for your entire like luxury network, colleagues, architect, designers, the trades, everyone in the luxury part of the industry, what is like one piece of advice that you feel is not said a lot or something that you deeply believe in?
Uh, I don't know that it's not said a lot, but I don't know if it's done at the level it should be. And one is commute communicate at a high level early. I mean, what we do is we're not building rockets out here. Okay. What we do is hard, but it's not complicated. And if we communicate at a high level early on, so we're not chasing details, so that we're not trying to mitigate what we forgot to talk about up front, that solves a lot of stuff. So especially in the luxury space, because so much time, so many times in the luxury space, we're not duplicating things. In the high volume, uh, those folks are those folks are mass producing a very limited number of designs over and over and over again. So they can perfect that. For me, I know personally I'm a systems guy, but I need to perfect my systems to a point that they can be applied to different situations. It's not the same situation. It's a principle that you apply to different situations so they work. And I think in the luxury space where so much of it is design build and one off, we don't ever build the same house twice. So it's really about planning, communication early.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.